All right, so we have 2 weeks this week to do our activities because we are off the week of Thanksgiving. To be honest with you guys, I'm going to New Orleans with my family, so I will not be working. I will check my email if you guys have questions, but kind of a relaxed part of the semester. So I thought a lot about what to do. We've got this week and then Thanksgiving, and then 2 more weeks, and then the end of the semester. And we don't have a lot more stuff to do, right? And rather than cram in a bunch more stuff at the end, because you guys worked hard at the beginning of the semester, I'd rather relax a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll cover oligopoly. Just be forewarned, there's a lot of oligopoly models in your textbook that we will not be covering. We will do the kinked demand curve. We'll probably talk a little bit about cartels, and that's probably about it. And then we'll do price discrimination the last week, which is interesting and fun. So I thought this is a perfect time to just relax and talk about some special topics. So the first thing I want to note is that I'm going to be focusing a lot on the economics of COVID. There's two reasons for that. Number one, we've got supply chain issues, and we need to talk about that, and I'm going to lecture a little bit on it today. But also, I taught a whole class on the economics of COVID. And so if you are interested, I've got a little write-up about the way I structured it. I actually have all the materials available online if you guys want to download it. But I'm actually offering this in the summer just for you guys, just for the Dual Teach Indiana program. So I'm teaching a course in summer one on the economics of COVID. So if you're interested in this stuff, there's a whole lot more we can do. But your assignment this week is not on Connect. What we're going to have you do is I'm going to have you do a 2 to 3 page paper with at least 2 sources cited properly about what COVID did or is doing to a particular industry. So it actually should not take more than a half hour. I don't think this is not like an academic paper. I want your sources to be cited properly, but it's basically just going to be like an analysis from your point of view. So for example, fashion, like I actually gave an article in my COVID class called Sweatpants Forever, right? Coffee sales are up, Nestle is doing well. Small businesses, we'll talk a little bit about this, but small businesses got really hurt with COVID. Toilet paper, oh my gosh, I went to Meijer this weekend and there's like a toilet paper shortage again. It's crazy. Used cars, that's an interesting one. Gym memberships, movies, whatever, something. The paper can be informal, but the sources do need to be good. So, for example, you could say, I'm still confused why people are buying so many trucks, but I think it could be because of this. I'm not quite sure. What do you think, right? Written in the first person. I don't want you to be stressed out about this. This is meant to be a helpful activity for you to connect what we're doing in class to a topic. You do need to have a graph. It's probably supply and demand, just because I think it's helpful to make that connection, especially if you think about covering it in class. All right, so what I'm going to do today, though, in this lecture is I'm going to go through a few interesting industries and things that I learned from guest speakers in my COVID class. And then what we'll do is we'll talk about these supply chain issues. So the first thing that I wanted to mention, so when I taught this class, so it was in fall 2 of 2020, GDP numbers came out in the middle of the class, and GDP grew at 33%, right? Like, how cool is it that I was teaching that class and we could talk about it? But one thing I decided to do is, like, back in 2020, there were so many losers, right? Like, so many companies, so many industries were losing from the pandemic. I wanted to cover a few that were winning. And so one thing that I discovered is that CSAs, community-supported agriculture, were up, as was local food. Now, if you guys remember, the meat packing plants were, there was like a lot of cases of COVID spreading in those right away. So people like me, actually I was pregnant at the time, I didn't want to leave the house, but I was like really interested in local food. I was kind of grossed out by these meat packing plants. And so I discovered this service. It's called Wagon. And basically it's a farmer's market delivery service. And so, wow, look at that. They've expanded so much. And so what happens is you can like put in your address, zip code, and It shows you, oh, well, here's a local meat producer. You can buy their meat or whatever. It's $6 and they deliver your farmer's market food. All right, anyway, so the point of talking about this is I had the CEO talk to my class. And the CEO was a very interesting guy. He said that there was a 400% increase in sales within 1 week. So there was a week in, I think, April, where everyone just freaked out and didn't want to leave their house, and everyone wanted local food delivered to their house. So he talked about how they went to Menards and they bought all the shelving available and they tried to set up new distribution stations and all of this stuff. I remember getting a call that week as a customer and they said, "We're so sorry, your food's going to be delivered late because we've got so much demand." Interesting guy though, right? Because he talks about this, all of these concepts. Basically, if there's this increase in demand and you can't meet it right away, you lose it permanently. Like if they said, "Oh, sorry, we can't deliver to you," I would never come back. So his goal was to take that and make it sustainable. Let's just see, 46385. So whatever, you guys can play with that website yourself. But another thing I wanted to mention about this guy is he said there was an egg shortage. You could not buy eggs at the time. And so these local news stations were, according to him, shoving a camera on his face saying, "How do we get your eggs? How do we get your eggs?" And so there was this huge increase in demand for his eggs. And he, the mission of his company is to help farmers. He did not want to price gouge. He wanted to make local food available for reasonable prices, whatever. He said he didn't want to charge $12 for eggs. And so he said what he's discovered is the best way to drop prices is to add a second egg supplier, right? And so if you have one egg supplier and they have a monopoly over that, and then you add a second one, the prices drop. I said, that's exactly what I teach my students all the time, right? So that's one of the winners. It's kind of an interesting thing. If you have any CSAs around you, you might have heard that they sold out really fast that year. Another thing that we covered that's interesting is small businesses, and small businesses were hurt really hard. One thing I did not realize is just how many restaurants are not profitable. I don't know, it's 50% or something of restaurants don't make regular profits before the pandemic. Then you throw the pandemic in and there's seating restrictions, right? And restaurants don't make money unless they're at capacity. And so this was really, really hurt small businesses and restaurants in particular. So I had another guest speaker, this guy who owned Chunky Tacos in Valparaiso. And they opened their store in March of 2020. So you can imagine how that went, right? He actually never had anyone sit inside. And so talking to this guy was interesting because he talked a lot about the struggles. And if you remember hearing about the PPP loans, this was part of the first stimulus package. I forget what it even stands for, but these businesses could apply for these loans from the government. So this guy who owns the store has his bachelor's in engineering, super smart guy. He said it took him hours to figure out how to do this. And it just was rolled out so fast. And he ended up figuring it out, and he actually walked up and down the street to help other owners apply for these things, because he's like, if it took me this long, some people are not going to be able to do it. The PPP program is deemed to be not very successful. So for every, what was it? For every job saved, it was $400,000 of taxpayer money or something. So that was another interesting case study. And a third thing we talked about is the car market. And this is an example of a winner. So the car market was doing really well. And I actually had a former student who's a sales manager at a Chevy dealership down in the southern part of Indianapolis. And man, that guy was doing well. He's like, I'm paid on commission. I'm super happy. What was happening in the car market is really complex, and I would encourage you guys to research it for your classes if you're interested, or for your assignment this week. But basically, there was an increase in the demand for cars because interest rates were low, but not all cars. So if you remember, gas prices were low, And so there was this increase in demand for like SUVs and for trucks and also for luxury vehicles. But then supply dropped as well because of supply chain issues, which we'll talk about, but also the factories were shut down for a while. And then we had this weird knockoff effect in the used car market. So because new cars and used cars are substitutes, the demand for used cars went up. So this guy Jacob, who talked to my class, he said, I cannot get a used car on the lot. He said, if I get a trucks in particular, if I get a truck, that will be gone the next day. And he tells my class, he says, if any of you has a truck with less than 50,000 miles on it, please contact me. I will drive up and get it from you, right? Crazy things happening in the car market. And I said, Jacob, what's happening? Is it the stimulus money? Is that why people are buying so many? He said, no, because people will come in with $10,000 down payment with a credit score of 500. He had no idea what was happening. He was super happy about it, though. And then something else I'd encourage you guys to look at is the oil futures. So I'm actually doing this Friday in class. There was a period of time where oil futures became negative. So an oil future is like you promised to buy oil in the future at a set price. And this meant you would have to pay someone to get rid of it. Yeah. So you're not buying it. You actually get paid to receive the oil. That's what it is. And the reason these went negative is it was a really complex market structure. We've got OPEC. We've got all of these things. We ran out of places to put oil. So there was literally nowhere to store the oil. So people bought these futures and they were like, oh my God, I don't have anywhere to put it. So that's another crazy thing that happened. So we think about, COVID and how it's messed with all of these markets. And, these are just such a small part of what you guys could cover. My gosh, the live music industry, the art industry, so many things were impacted. But one thing that we have to talk about in a micro class is the supply chain. So what I have done is I found this article. You're welcome to read it, but I am going to go through it point by point. And we're going to talk about how that fits in with our class. So if you want to pull up the article, now's the time. I'm going to stop this video and start another one.